Ms. Brown is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. As it's been stated, U.S. competitiveness is critical to the residents in Ohio's 11th Congressional District, the Midwest, and across the nation. As the relationship between the U.S. and China evolves, I am committed to supporting American manufacturing and trade, boosting American competitiveness with equity and inclusion, supporting human labor, opposing surveillance, and preventing cybersecurity threats pertaining to the spread of misinformation and disinformation in the United States. Since 2020, the U.S. government has restricted certain firms of Chinese origin from doing business in the United States, but has not used country or sectoral restrictions, leaving most U.S.-China commercial activity open. The U.S. government handles state commercial actions on a case-by-case basis and holds individual actors accountable, not the state more broadly. So, Mr. Paul, my question is for you. What broader state restrictions and accountability, if any, could address these U.S. concerns?
Representative Brown, thank you so much for the question. It's an important issue. So I think that we have some foundations upon which to build. We have inbound investment reviews through the CFIUS law. We can certainly enhance the enforcement of that and expand its scope. Through direct taxpayer investment, we can restrict the access to Chinese firms for that. For example, there were over 100 Chinese firms that had connections to the government that received PPP assistance. There are state-owned firms in transit that is CRRC and state-connected firms like BYD that have secured transit dollars. You can expand the scope of restrictions there, and we can more carefully calibrate research and where that goes. In my testimony, I articulated issues with U.S. labs then licensing technology that was developed at taxpayer expense to Chinese firms. And there is a law in place to start to stop that was bipartisan within Homeland Security, but that should be expanded as well. And we should also consider what the scope and the type of Chinese investment is. What we've seen a lot, unfortunately, and I think you've experienced this in Ohio, is you've seen industries like steel and glass and others where there have been just total decimation of these industries. Sometimes Chinese firms come in and take up some of the domestic marketplace. And that's not necessarily something that I think is healthy for our economy. For every job that creates, it probably displaces 3 or 5 other jobs that were in value chains in the United States. So there's a lot of room to maneuver here.
Thank you for that. And have U.S. officials prioritized short-term commercial interests over longer-term considerations related to U.S. competitiveness?
I think up until recently, unfortunately, the answer was yes. And that's why we had 2 decades of permanent normal trade relations for China, no real consequences for the Chinese misbehavior that I described that was measurable in any way. Recently, we have seen that shift. I think we're playing the long game now. And as I mentioned, I think there are a couple of aspects to that. I think a trade enforcement strategy is key, but I think a domestic competitiveness agenda is also key, and that requires public investment, that requires attention to our infrastructure, to our workplace, to make sure that we're not only the leaders in innovation, but we're the leaders in production again.
All right, well, thank you for your recommendations as this committee continues to explore opportunities to create policy and conduct oversight regarding the U.S.-China and trade relationship. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Barr is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our